my name is Ryan Cam, and welcome back to the 1999 Project. In the words of the Beatles from Here Comes the Sun, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter, but here comes the sun, do. We've actually got some good movies to talk about this week, so let's dive in. First and foremost, let's talk about probably the worst movie that I'm covering this week, and honestly, it's not even that bad of a movie. It's just kind of there. It's Hideous, Kinky. And yes, that is the actual title.
B, when you grow up, would you like to be a shepherd? I'd like to be normal.
Hideous, Kinky was directed by, and I'm going to read the director's name so I don't screw it up, Gillies McKinnon. Close enough. And the movie starred Kate Winslet, and this would be the first movie that she would star in after a little movie called Titanic. You might have heard of it. It tells the story of a woman who uproots herself and her two daughters from London to Morocco to start over, basically. She hates the kind of cloistered and just conforming society of the English and wants to experience something different. And we basically see the wild adventures therein. Kind of both a blessing and a curse of this movie is that there is like the feeling that there's almost like no story. And what I mean by that is that it feels like a series of short stories that are taking place in this world. And I felt like there was almost no like narrative through line in any of them. I don't think we even really learn all that much about the main characters, specifically Kate Winslet's character. All we know about her is that basically she wants to get away from her husband. Okay, that's fine. And she has two daughters. All right, very good. But then it's like she always makes these mistakes in this movie where she falls in love with this dude. This dude is kind of sus, but is like, all right, he's good with the daughters, so let's see where he goes with this. And then he just disappears, and it is implied that he is a criminal, question mark?
It just raises too many questions.
Kate Winslet is good in the movie, predictably so, and really I liked her relationship with herself and her two daughters. The daughters were actually giving good performances as well. The older daughter is clearly in on like what's really going on here, and she wants to stop running and she wants to go to school and she wants to be a normal 7, 8-year-old girl, and I sympathized with that. I feel like this movie could have benefited from being longer and like explaining like everyone's motivations here. This movie was giving off Glass Castle vibes. For those that need context, Glass Castle was a movie that came out in 2017. It starred Brie Larson and Woody Harrelson about a family that basically lived off the lam. The patriarch of the family was like, we don't need to be in society, when in reality he was flat broke and basically when he got drunk, he abused his wife and the kids. It's a whole thing. Honestly, Rachel from Rachel's Reviews has a more epic rant on it than I could ever have. But throughout the movie, I was just thinking to myself, all right, Kate Winslet's character, you don't seem to really have a plan of what to do here outside of, I need to get away for a while. Just take a step from Eat, Pray, Love, and I don't know, like just go from there. I don't know. This movie's just very weird. I'm gonna say this movie's pretty forgettable. Kate Winslet would do much better things after this, but this is a weird step to take after Titanic because literally the year after Titanic for Leonardo DiCaprio, he was in The Man in the Iron Mask, which is a far superior movie to this in every way. But moving on now, let us talk about a movie that honestly I had been quoting a reference to for years and had no idea where it was from until I watched this movie for the first time. Play the clip.
The upper room.
I've been quoting that in so many conversations and I had no idea where I had heard it from. And it turns out it's from the movie I'm going to be talking about right now. It's called Life.
Life. You gonna make me fall off this talking to your ass. Every time you start talking, I almost fall. Will you done? Will you stop? Just don't say nothing else to me.
Life was directed by Ted Demme, and the movie starred Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence, among others. It's actually a pretty solid cast, including Anthony Anderson and Bernie Mac as well. And the movie tells the story of two criminals played by Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence who have debts to pay, let's just say. And so they take a bootlegging job taking illegal moonshine to the antebellum South during Prohibition. You can imagine this goes as well as you think. They get pinned for a murder they did not commit and are sentenced to life at the Mississippi State Prison, which is just a miserable experience, I imagine. Say whatever you want to about the quality of the movies he's been in, but Eddie Murphy is legit one of the funniest actors of all time. Watch his Raw or Delirious specials, and if you don't laugh at those, then you need your pulse checked, because he absolutely crushes in those specials. And he's had some bad movies, let's not get it twisted, but whenever Eddie Murphy is building something, I'm immediately curious. And same thing kind of with Martin Lawrence, but Eddie Murphy's had a more consistent track record, I guess. So there was a part of me that was like, all right, even if nothing else, these two will be good. And they are the best parts of the movie. However, this is another case where this movie's kind of weird in how it's structured, because the first two thirds of this movie, excuse me, are watchable but not great. And then the third act is excellent. I'll not spoil it, but basically the first two thirds are these two getting into prison and then them trying to get out of prison. And then the second third of the movie is them basically getting institutionalized, to quote Morgan Freeman from The Shawshank Redemption. And speaking of, this movie essentially turns into a comedic version of The Shawshank Redemption. And there's even an angle which one of the prisoners gets paroled and doesn't want to be paroled, so much so that he gets past the gun line and one of the guards shoots him dead. So they basically recycled the plot line for Brooks in The Shawshank Redemption, but put it through the cartoon-o-matic. It was cringe, and I hated it. Then there's another subplot in which the superintendent's daughter gets pregnant and she ends up having a black baby. And so there is a moment in which all of the prisoners, and all the prisoners are African American, they're lined up, and has his grandchild in his hand and is like doing this to where he's like, who does he look like? Who does he look like? And then they reenact the moment from Spartacus where they're like, I'm the baby's daddy. No, sir, I'm the baby's daddy. And they all do the I am Spartacus moment. And it was weird. It was awkward. And I was just in there like, this is the greatest movie year of all time? This was the standard for comedy? What are we doing here? Then the last third happens. And honestly, it's that last third that saves the movie. I will not spoil it, but basically things happen in the first act that are paid off in the third act that I was not prepared for, but it ended up saving the entire movie. So much so that I'm going to give this a good rating. This is not a perfect movie by any stretch, but the third act was so good that I at least give it a modest recommendation. The Upper Room, indeed, or The Upper Room. But let's move on now to talking about The Winslow Boy.
The Winslow Boy.
A toast to the happy pair.
Doesn't it say, let right be done?
The Winslow Boy was directed by David Mamet, a legendary screenwriter who is primarily known for writing things such as The Untouchables, and it was based on the play written by Terrence Rattigan. It tells the story of a young boy who is a part of a very wealthy family. He is kicked out of a naval academy for stealing a postal order. I'm sure in the 1800s that was a severe offense, but it's severe enough to where he is expelled, but he swears up and down that he did not do this. And so his family fights for him in court. As I said, David Mamet is a legendary screenwriter and director. The Untouchables is one of his many credits, and I'm sure, and there are definitely others, but I will put posters in the post. But David Mamet really wanted to do this one, and so he basically wanted to create like an on-stage version of it and film it and then release that. However, that was too expensive, and so they basically made it into the movie format. I am happy that David Mamet got to make the movie of the play that he loved so much, but this movie was kind of boring. A large chunk of this movie is basically people standing in rooms talking. It's literally like a play, and I love going to plays very much, but those usually have like people acting their butts off and really committing. And not saying they don't commit here, but because they are making a movie, they basically have to tone it down a bit. And I feel like there's a disconnect. I appreciate the fact that the family gets behind the boys so much so. My favorite scene of the movie is when the Winslow boy is talking to his father, and his father's like, I'm going to ask you once, and you are going to tell me the truth. If you did not do this, I will fight for you. If you did do this, then you need to tell me. And the boy is like, I did not do this. And he says it several times. And then the father's like, all right, let's send the troops. And I love that scene so much. And the rest of the movie just kind of peters out after that. This movie is honestly pretty forgettable. And I feel like there is a good movie somewhere here. If they actually gave a little more like schmaltz to like the court scenes, I would have liked that. But it feels very much bare bones, stripped down, like here is the play, but just in movie form. And I don't know, it was just kind of there. But rounding things off, this is a movie that really blindsided me, and I just love to pieces. It's The Jack Bull.
John Cusack and John Goodman star in The Jack Bull. One way or the other, there's gonna be justice.
The Jack Bull was directed by John Badham, the man behind movies like Saturday Night Fever and War Games, and the movie starred three Johns, including Cusack, Goodman, and C. McGinley, as well as L.Q. Jones. It tells the story of a horse trader named Merle Redding, played by Cusack. He has a patch of land, he has horses that he tends to and sells, he has ranch hands, he has a loving wife, he has a loving son. What else could you want? Well, yeah, all that pretty much gets taken away from him. A series of bad deals and unfortunate events. A greedy businessman named Ballard, played by L.Q. Jones, mistreats the horses that Merle sells to him, beats up his ranch hands, and then causes, inadvertently, the death of his wife as she is run over by a stagecoach. When Merle learns of his wife's death, he quotes Bugs Bunny.
Of course you realize this means war.
Launches a war against Ballard and his associates. This was released on HBO, and I've covered a couple of HBO movies on this series already, and they were both not super great. So I was not super looking forward to this, even though I have a soft spot for Westerns. But man alive, I was not prepared for how much I loved this movie, and I loved this movie. It was so good. Honestly, this is one of John Cusack's best performances. He's cold as ice in this movie, and I mean that as a compliment. He is disciplined, he knows exactly what he wants, even though almost everything's been taken away from him. He just wants what Ballard promised him, which was about $50, which in that time was a lot of money, both of his horses back to the shape that he left them in the hands of Ballard, and compensation for his ranch hand who was beaten up. Because Ballard's pettiness and greed outweighs his practicality, he basically says, no, like you could go kick rocks. And so Redding basically gathers a small army and says, all right, I'm just going to declare war on you. He doesn't want blood, he doesn't want death or anything of that sort. He just wants exactly what is owed to him, nothing more, nothing less. I love that. I love the spirit of that. L.Q. Jones is suitably over the top as Ballard. The previous year, he was actually one of the henchmen to Alejandro and Morietta de la Vega. He was Three-Fingered Jack in The Mask of Zorro, which when I saw him, I'm like, oh wow, Three-Fingered Jack is in the movie. And he basically plays the same role, just with like more of an edge. He's also in this movie as a judge, Judge Tolliver, and I love this character. His role is brief, but he is just awesome. He is a judge that just knows his job and just has no time for any BS. He has a monologue in this movie to this other judge who is on the take. After the monologue was over, I almost paused the movie and was like, I would like to elect you president. And I will not spoil it, but basically the ending of this movie is, well, Redding gets everything that he wants, which is both a curse and a blessing. But I'll leave the rest of that ambiguous. Long story short, watch this movie. It's getting an amazing grade. I don't know if it is on Max, but if you can find the DVD or the Blu-ray, find it and watch it. You will not regret it. But what did you think of any of the movies I've talked about? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read what you have to say. And stay tuned for next week, where, among other movies, I will be covering, for the first time ever, this will be a first-time watch for me, the film from Alexander Payne, Election.